we're probably a generation away from valuing the quality of education and the advantages that a quality education provide. Many of our parents today have, and especially our grandparents, have been able to make it without even a high school diploma. Well, our kids today they're not going to experience that. They're not going to be able to find those jobs to sustain the quality of life they grew up in unless they go back and they become trained and skilled. And they'll be, I think that they'll be continually in and out of training. There are some projections that we're seeing that by the time that our students are 38, they will have had 14 different jobs and being retrained in between.
Wow.
So it's times are changing and the demands are changing. We need to, as a society and as a state, we need to value getting our citizenry educated and trained. And that's what the American Diploma Project and everything we're working on is about. Now, from the BEP and the resources, by statutory responsibility, the state board is responsible to manage a BEP review committee, and we work annually on looking at the components, making recommendations for funding, and the governor and the legislature over time have maintained that formula. Is it enough? Sure, no, most of us agree it's not enough. Local school systems are having to supplement what the state is providing, but the state is doing everything it can, I believe, with the resources that are available. In the last year, as it was a good example, you saw significant improvement. We had a good year. This year, we still have pretty good improvements in there. Even though we're in a turn-down time, the state is still showing its support for public education in Tennessee, and we're grateful to Governor Bredesen and to the legislature for all the things that they're doing to try to help us move forward. It's absolutely critical for our future that we do this, that we implement these standards and courses and exams and all the things along the way in the plan to give us a chance of being successful. Now, there are 32 other states that are trying to do what we're trying to do. If we fail, and I don't think we're going to fail, don't get me wrong, but if we do and there's 25 other states who succeed, where will the jobs go? So it's very much about Tennessee's future.
With all the changes, do you think the state will still administer the TCAP testing?
I think yes, there will be testing. It will be a different test. The Department of Education has already sent out and received proposals for developing new assessments around the new standards in the elementary and middle grade tests. We will shortly, they will soon be issuing RFPs for the high school end of course test, and we'll just kind of have to see how those bids come in and look at the funds that are available to see how many tests are finally approved. Today, the statutes and the policies today would have you have end of course tests in probably 10 areas that cover 12 or 13 different subjects, and we're only testing 5. The resources have only been available to help us to do 5. And so I suspect it'll be somewhere, we may wind up in somewhere in the same number of end of course exams in high school. Could be more. If we had our choice, if funds were not an issue, and they may not be. In the policies that we approve, we've asked for end of course tests in Algebra 1 and Geometry and Algebra 2. We've asked for end of course tests in English 1, 2, and 3, biology, chemistry, and or physics, because the requirement is biology and chemistry or physics and another science, and U.S. history. So we'll have to see and pick from that category. There's another piece that's in the policy that I think is very interesting. We've moved away from the high stakes exams for the diploma, where students have to pass the gateways, the tests to get their diploma. Now they have to pass the class. And then, of course, tests will average with their teacher assigned grades. And ultimately, it'll count 25% of the yearly grade. So that's pretty powerful, we think. But it's possible to have high class grades and a low test score and still get a 70 average to pass. So we've put into this a kind of a new wrinkle that says, schools, sit down and look at what you're doing. Look at those teacher-assigned grades. Just say biology, for example, and you take the first and the second semester grades and average them together and find the mean. And then we'll give you test reports back that are grade reports, not a percentile, but an actual grade, like a 68 or a 92. Then look at the mean of those test score grades. Now, if they're close, everything's wonderful. But if there's a big disparity, if they're far apart, you've got some issues you need to tackle. Put that in your school improvement plan. Start to develop strategies to find out what's wrong, what's causing the disparity, and then close it.
The governor wants to give all children in the state of Tennessee access to pre-K programs. We've had politicians sit in the very seat you're sitting in and tell us that they do absolutely nothing, that pre-K is no help at all for children, and we've had someone sit there and tell us it solves everything from graduation rates to crime statistics. Where do you stand in this debate?
The state board developed the current standards for pre-K back in the late 90s. So the state board has been very much an advocate. They've seen the research from the national databases that have very longitudinal data that followed kids through into adulthood. And the data there clearly shows it makes a difference. I believe it makes a difference. I've talked to kindergarten teachers, first and second grade teachers that have had students now that are coming through and those who haven't. And my question is, can you tell the difference? And are we capturing, by just looking at the children who are at risk, who are in poverty, are we solving the problem? The answer was yes, we're really helping with their issues. We're catching them up, and they are being much more successful when they enter kindergarten, first grade. But there are a number of children who are not in poverty who need that service. They're still entering kindergarten without pre-K and being behind. So their advice was, let's open it up to students who perhaps are not in poverty if they would like to come and need to come. So we support Governor Bredesen, and in pre-K, we believe it is one of the pieces of the puzzle that we have to implement. And my hat's off to Governor Bredesen for making pre-K one of his top priorities. And I commend the legislature for following it and for funding it. We've made significant strides in Tennessee, and we're held up as the national model for others to emulate. And it's nice to be in that position. We're not held up in a lot of areas, but
good place to be.
Tennessee takes a lot of heat for its ranking in education. At the end of the diploma project, there's a quote that reads, "We won't create change until there is more pressure for change than resistance to change." Do you think we're ready now?
I think we're past it. I think the tipping point came when the National Chamber report came out. And when they looked at Tennessee's TCAP scores, perhaps in 8th grade math and reading, and we look like we're 87% proficient or better, and then they look at our scores on the NAEP assessment. Now remember, a NAEP assessment is a sampling, it's statistically appropriate, but we only have 23% proficient in 8th grade in those areas, so there's a big gap. And when they gave us an F in truth in advertising, and I think that was one of the tipping points that caused we're not that bad, but we're not that great either. If we had the definitions the same, we'd still have a gap. But now we're comparing apples and oranges. Now think with me for a second. In Tennessee, we have below proficient, proficient, and advanced. And the lowest score on proficient, if we equated it over to a grade, would be a 70. The lowest proficient score would be passing. On the NAEP, there's another measure in between below and proficient called basic. And you may say, I think one could draw the parallel, it's not exact, but it'll be pretty close, that the low basic would be a passing. Proficient, from what we've learned from high schools that works assessment that gives a NAEP-like, and we're measuring for college readiness, proficient on NAEP is well above college readiness. College readiness is somewhere mid-upper basic. So it's hard to say you get an F well, we do get an F in truth in advertising because we're telling parents, your kids are doing great. They're proficient or advanced. At Blackman High School, where I was last principal, we were proud that we had 80% and 75% of our kids scoring at the advanced level. Right. But they were not advanced on a serious exam. They were advanced on a low level. They did well on a low level test.
I hate to cut you off here, but we are out of time. We appreciate all of your insight.
It's been great
being here with us today. Well, for more information on the Tennessee Board of Education, you can log on to the website. That's state.tn.us/SBE, or you can call 741-2966.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.